Chapter 17. All work and no play makes Joey a dull boy. By the summer of 2000, I decided I needed a little fun back in my life. Some of my old friends from the playground days, namely our old mascot manager Ernie Lamonti, would always rent a house in the Hamptons for the summer. The Hamptons is a famous beach town located on the tip of Long Island, New York. I would visit one of Ernie's share houses once or twice every summer over the last few years, and I always had a great time. In the summer of 2000, I decided to become a full share in one of his houses. This basically meant that I would pay somewhere in the neighborhood of $2,000 for a spot in one of the bedrooms for the entire summer, giving me full access to whatever I wanted. Ernie and company always rented a massive place with a giant backyard and an in-ground swimming pool. It was just what I needed. The summer consisted of drinking by the pool all day and then going to a few clubs at night. It was just the distraction my mind needed to get away from the everyday grind of Valentine Smith. I told the guys in the band that I was unavailable most weekends that summer due to family commitments. But I said that if any really important shows or appearances came up, I would be able to change my plans. I knew in my heart that all of these small local shows were doing nothing for the band. The CD was a success, but it wasn't getting the traction that we'd hoped for. In my humble opinion, Valentine Smith just never really had a clear goal or a path to achieve such a goal. The band was great, the songs were great, but a band needed more than that. The band needed to put itself out there and network and push the product down people's throats. I think Steve and Bill just thought someone would come along and knock on their door. That was never my mindset. If I wanted something, I would go kick the door down and take it. But because they never wanted any input from me or from the other members, I was forced to let them do it their way. So I decided to basically take the summer off and do things my way. By then, I'd been in a band since I was 15 years old, and I had never really gotten to let loose and have fun without thinking about business. Don't get me wrong, playing in all of my bands was amazing fun, and I had a great time gigging and partying. But there was always an underlying sense that this was work and I couldn't go overboard. The Hamptons was the exact opposite. It was the first time in a very long while that I didn't have to worry about band business. I could just let loose. The summer of 2000 was a fantastic time with a lot of partying and just being stupid. It was just what I needed. One of the best parts about the Hampton house was I could really just be myself. As you know, I was always a huge wrestling fan, and wrestling had become popular again over the last 3 or 4 years. My childhood hero, Hulk Hogan, was now considered a heel, and guys like Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock were becoming very popular. As a nightly ritual, after coming home drunk from one of the clubs, the whole house would put on a giant wrestling match. It was fantastic. I still can't believe someone didn't get seriously injured. We would body slam each other onto the floor, jump off the counter, and superfly splash people. I was constantly applying Ric Flair's figure 4 leg lock on unsuspecting victims. It was just non-stop fun from arrival on Thursday night until our departure on Monday morning. I would constantly try to talk business with Steve and Bill from Valentine Smith, but they never seemed interested or motivated. I'm not sure if they were blowing me off because they thought I was young and didn't know anything, or they just felt like they had it all under control. It was very frustrating. 2001 was more of the same from Valentine Smith. We played plenty of meaningless shows with no real goal or idea of what we were doing. Once the summer of 2001 came, I decided I would once again do the Hamptons house with Ernie and company. The summer of 2001 proved to be even better than 2000. This year, Ernie and I, plus our friend Billy Zemish, would be in charge of running our own house. We went and searched for the perfect house and finally found it at 10 Penny Lane. The house was much older and smaller than the year before, but we would be able to get it at a lower cost and have control over who became shares in the house. It was perfect. We even had some of our old playground boys back partying every weekend. Tommy Snyder was there all the time, along with guitarist Steve Karasotis. It was another absolutely perfect summer of fun. In the fall of 2001, I came to a very big revelation. Why couldn't I have fun in a band like I was having in the Hamptons every summer? I had it once before with Playground, and that's exactly what I wanted again. The business and egos in Valentine Smith were really a bummer to be around day in and day out. I wanted to have fun playing my drums again. I wasn't sure exactly what that meant, but I knew that I needed a side project away from Valentine Smith to fulfill the fun side of my music career. My plan was to stay with Valentine Smith and basically wait it out to see if it hit big. But in the meantime, I would find another band that I would have fun playing with. The hunt began. I immediately went back to my tried and true place to find bands, the music papers. This time it would be the Village Voice. I wasn't exactly sure what I was looking for, but I was hoping I'd recognize it when I saw it. After flipping through the papers for a few minutes, I saw an ad that I had to read twice to believe. It said, Kiss Tribute Band doing Creatures of the Night era Kiss, looking for drummer to be Eric Carr. This was no mere coincidence. This was fate. Something I truly believe in, along with the idea that things happen for a reason. This was one of those times. What were the chances of me looking in the Village Voice that day and finding a Kiss band looking for a drummer to be Eric Carr? I'd never heard of or seen any tribute band doing Eric Carr. I called the phone number immediately and spoke to a guy named Ruby. Ruby Renexo was Ace Frehley in the band Kiss Nation. He explained to me that they were looking for a full-time drummer and that they had a few shows coming up rather quickly. He was very matter-of-fact and to the point. Dare I say, businesslike, which I found a little odd because at the time I thought a tribute band was just for fun. He told me he'd email me a song list that I would need to have ready for the audition. The next day, I received 3 different emails from Ruby, each containing a different group of about 12 songs. I responded to the emails and asked him which of these song groups he wanted me to learn for the audition. He replied that I should learn all of them just to be safe. He explained that because Kiss Nation was doing Eric Carr and the Creatures of the Night era of Kiss, they needed to know a lot of oddities from the Kiss catalog. Because Kiss had so many different versions of their songs, be it on live albums, studio, or greatest hits, I asked Ruby what versions he wanted me to learn. He replied, whenever possible, learn the Kiss Animalize uncensored video versions. I couldn't believe that's what they wanted. I knew that video like the back of my hand. Every little lick and fill that Eric Carr did on that video, I'd probably played 1,000 times. Like I said, it was fate. Getting ready for the Kiss Nation audition was not only super fun, but very exciting. There wasn't much I loved to do more than playing Kiss songs. I rehearsed a few times at the Valentine Smith studio in Hoboken, and as I was playing the songs, I couldn't help but imagine what it would feel like playing these songs in Kiss makeup and costume. After 2 rehearsals, I was more than ready. I knew this gig was mine. I was set to meet the guys in Kiss Nation at Funkadelic Studios on West 40th Street in Manhattan. When I arrived, I saw 2 guys standing in the hallway chatting. I knew right away it was the guys from Kiss Nation. Ruby was Asian and had the exact same demeanor as Ace. The same hair as Ace, and he even stood with his legs in a weird twisted pose, just like I'd seen pictures of how Ace stood. There was also a Puerto Rican-looking guy standing next to Ruby with a giant afro. He looked just like Gene Simmons, even without makeup. His name was Carlos Espada. It was a little weird and surreal at the time. I loved Eric Carr, but I didn't go around my everyday life looking like him. Did these guys actually study Ace's and Gene's mannerisms and incorporate them into their everyday life? I wasn't sure, but I wanted to find out more. Ruby said, "Hey, we are about to audition another guy before you. Can you wait in the hallway while we play a few songs with him?" I waited and listened behind the door. After a song or two, I could tell the guy was a decent drummer, but he wasn't playing anything like Eric Carr. I knew the ins and outs of everything Eric did, and this guy wasn't doing any of them. I was extremely confident at this point. After about 25 minutes, the door opened and Ruby waved me in. The other drummer was packing up while Ruby introduced me to their Paul Stanley. He had bright fluorescent red hair and said with a thick Brooklyn accent, "Hey, I'm Paulie Z." Once I was set up and ready to go, I asked Ruby, "What song do you want to start with?" I had all 36 songs Ruby asked me to learn down pat, and I could fire any one of them off first. Ruby paused for a minute and said, "Let's do Strutter." I actually began to laugh out loud. I said to Ruby, "Just so you know, Strutter was not on the list of 36 songs you gave me." "I do know it, but I just wanted to tell you that." I was kind of annoyed. Carlos then laughingly yelled at Ruby, "You gave him 36 songs to learn? What are you, nuts?" Paulie began to laugh, and seconds later Ruby and I joined in. I played the infamous drum intro to Strutter, and we were off. I could tell they were immediately impressed. Even though I didn't practice this particular song for the audition, I knew all of the little differences in how Eric Carr played it compared to how Peter Criss played it on the drums. We barreled through 4 or 5 more songs, and I was having a blast. These guys sounded like Kiss. The singer Paulie Z sounded like Paul Stanley. Carlos sang just like Gene Simmons. And Ruby played guitar very sloppily, just like Ace. Carlos then said, "Hey, let's finish with Black Diamond." This was the one thing I was a little worried about. Up until this point, I didn't do a lot of background singing in any of my bands. I'd done some, but definitely not a lead vocal like Black Diamond. It was a pretty hard song to simultaneously play and sing. I'd rehearsed it, but I didn't have access to Valentine Smith's PA system, so I couldn't rehearse singing it with a microphone. Ruby then said, "We are doing the big ending like on Kiss Animalize Uncensored. Do you know it?" The way he asked me always felt like he assumed I didn't know that version and was trying to catch me off guard. I responded, "Yes, I know it." He looked surprised and tried to explain more about what he meant, like he couldn't believe I'd learned that version. I quickly cut him off and said, "I know that version," and then began giving him an example of the tom-tom pattern at the end. Carlos smiled and looked at Ruby and said, "Yep, that's it, all right." While playing Black Diamond, I remembered thinking to myself, "Wow, Joe, you sound a lot like Eric singing this song right now." I'd never heard myself sing Black Diamond before, and it wasn't half bad. The song is naturally a little bit out of my range, but Eric would always growl through a lot of it, and I was able to mimic that pretty well. After the audition, the guys seemed pretty happy, but were trying not to let on. All they said was, "Thanks, we'll let you know." All I could do was smirk to myself. I knew that I had the gig. There was no way they were going to find a drummer that could play as much like Eric Carr as me. I thought to myself, I guess even in the tribute band world, people had egos. Sure enough, the next day I got the call from Ruby to ask me to join Kiss Nation. Even though I was still with Valentine Smith, I accepted. This was September 2001, shortly after the 9/11 World Trade Center attack. Kiss Nation was Paulie Z, rhythm guitar vocals, Carlos Espada, bass vocals, Ruby Renexo, lead guitar vocals, and Joey Cassata, drums vocals. My first Kiss Nation show was only a few weeks away on Halloween night at the Big Easy on 2nd Avenue and 92nd Street in New York. Musically, I was more than ready, but I still hadn't tried to put on the infamous Kiss makeup. When I was a kid, I was Ace Frehley and Gene Simmons for Halloween, and then I wore Peter Criss's makeup for my 6th grade talent show, but I'd never applied the makeup on my own, and I had no idea how I would apply Eric Carr's makeup or how I would look with it. Carlos said that I could use their old drummer's costume and boots, and Paulie said he had a wig for me to use. Once we loaded in, set up, and sound checked, it was time for me to attempt putting on my makeup. Carlos sent me a list a few days earlier on what makeup I should buy. He told me Kiss Nation used the same exact makeup that Kiss used. I thought that was very cool, and I was more than excited to go shopping to get it. I purchased a tub of Clown White, Ben Nye Black, and Ben Nye Red. I also purchased a few eyeliner pencils that Carlos suggested to draw the outline of the makeup. I wasn't sure what brush to buy, so I bought an array of different sizes just in case. Once we began to apply the makeup, Carlos was the only one to give me any pointers on the right way to apply it. I was assuming that they would all help me a little bit to make sure it looked perfect. Paulie seemed to be in his own world, and Ruby had an attitude as if saying, "Let him figure it out by himself. Nobody taught or helped me." This was exactly the type of stuff I was trying to get away from by joining Kiss Nation. I was applying Eric Carr's Kiss makeup and was about to do a 2-hour show of Kiss songs. Nothing could spoil my mood. When I finished applying the makeup and put my wig on, I looked in the mirror and couldn't believe my eyes. I looked just like Eric. It was actually a little creepy how much I looked like him. The other guys in the band couldn't believe it either. We blistered through an amazing 2+ hour set filled with Kiss classics and some rare cuts. It was exhilarating to play the songs I grew up idolizing. I had found my new outlet to once again enjoy playing my drums. Valentine Smith was still active, but nothing was currently happening. It was really the best of both worlds. I could play with Kiss Nation once or twice a month and do the same with Valentine Smith. Kiss Nation was for fun, and Valentine Smith was for business. I still hoped in the back of my mind that Valentine Smith would hit it big, but I knew it was wishful thinking. After the gig, we all loaded our gear to the sidewalk in front of the club. Paulie had a van and he would be transporting it for us. He would be taking me to the Valentine Smith studio in Hoboken. After about 20 minutes of waiting for Paulie to return from getting the van, we started to wonder what could be taking him so long. We called his phone to make sure everything was all right, but it started ringing in a bag that was sitting next to our gear. Carlos then said, "That Jig probably fell asleep again." Carlos called everyone Jig. "Fell asleep? What do you mean he fell asleep?" I said, confused. Carlos went on to explain that Paulie had a little bit of narcolepsy. I still couldn't quite grasp what he was saying. Did he fall asleep walking? Did he sit down on the curb to take a nap? I just couldn't wrap my head around someone falling asleep when he knew we were waiting for him on the sidewalk to pick up our gear. After another half an hour, we decided we should split up and go look for him. We left one of the Kiss Nation roadies, Vic, to watch the gear. We began to comb the streets in search for either Paulie passed out in the street or at least maybe his van. After another 30 minutes of searching the streets of uptown Manhattan, Carlos called me on my cell to tell me that he had found Paulie and the van. He was sleeping with thick white smoke pouring from the engine and filling the inside of the van. If Carlos hadn't found him, he would have probably suffocated. All of this was going on while he was fast asleep, snoring in the driver's seat, like nothing happened. This was my very first experience with Paulie Z, and the night was far from over. Paulie and Carlos returned with the van, and we finally loaded up the gear around 4 a.m. Carlos and Ruby didn't even seem that annoyed or surprised. This kind of thing had obviously happened before. They both had very minimal gear that they would leave in Paulie's van until the next gig. After they loaded theirs into the van, they hailed a cab with Vic the roadie, and they were on their way home. Unfortunately, my adventure with Paulie Z had just begun. Paulie and I were now off to Hoboken to drop off my drums. We jumped on the FDR Drive at 92nd Street and were on our way. About 20 blocks into our trip, thick white smoke once again began to pour out of the engine. Paulie frantically tried to pull over, but there wasn't much room on the FDR. We finally were able to get off at the 61st Street exit. We barely made it off the exit when the van completely died. Instead of pulling to the side of the street away from traffic, Paulie decided to just leave the car in the middle of the street, right off the FDR exit. He stopped the car and took the keys out of the ignition. Thick white smoke was still pouring out of the engine. It turned out that because Paulie had left the car running for about 2 hours while he took a nap, he must have overheated the engine in his old 1988 conversion van. Before I could ask him what we were going to do now, I looked over and he was once again fast asleep. I thought to myself, what the hell kind of freak is this? How could he fall asleep in the middle of the street while his van was overheating? I shook him and asked him, now what do we do? He replied, we have to wait for the engine to cool down. Then we can try again. He then put his head back and went to sleep as if he was comfy in his bed. About 45 minutes later, we tried the engine again, to no avail. Now it was getting close to mid-morning and cars were zipping around us and honking since we were blocking one whole lane off the exit. Even though it's not wise, Paulie decided he would pour water on the engine to speed up the process. It worked, but only temporarily. We finally got off the exit and drove about another 20 blocks when that white smoke began pouring out once again. This process would go on for the next few hours. Every 20 blocks or so, the engine would overheat, Paulie would pour water on it, and we would drive a little more. The van finally completely died at around 7 a.m. We had made it to 14th Street, and with the van full of gear and completely dead, I had no other option. I didn't know the guys in Kiss Nation well enough to just leave my drums in their broken down van like Paulie suggested. Actually, I did know Paulie well enough after the last 5 hours to know there was no way in hell I was leaving my drums in his care. He was liable to fall asleep again and have someone steal all of the gear right from under his nose. I decided I would hail a few taxi cabs and load everything into them. This was just about the time when the small minivan taxis were starting, and I was able to get 2 of those to fit all of my gear. I would have to take it all to my tiny apartment in Manhattan and carry it all the way up the 3 flights of stairs. That wasn't the part that bothered me the most. If I'd known that this was going to be the final outcome, I could have avoided the last 5 hours with Paulie and just taken a cab right after the show. Once I was loaded into the taxis, I asked Paulie, what are you going to do now? He said, I'm not sure. I guess I'll wait a little while and see if it starts again. I got in the taxi and headed home. As I was pulling away, I glanced back at Paulie in the van and saw that he had already fallen back to sleep. This was the end of my first adventure with Paulie Z. Unfortunately, there would be many more to come. My second Kiss Nation show would be in Ohio on November 15th, 2001. Kiss Nation would fly me out because I had a prior commitment and couldn't drive with them. I was to be godfather to my brother's daughter, Samantha, and the christening was on the morning of the show in Ohio. I would have to baptize my niece, go to the after party, and then go straight to the airport. Flying during this time was a bit challenging. It was right after the terror attacks on 9/11, and the airports had a very tight security. Because I was on a strict time constraint, I wouldn't be able to check a bag. I would just be making the gig as it was, so I didn't have time to wait for my bag in Ohio. I packed my costume, makeup, and a change of clothes in my carry-on bag, and that was it. When I went through the security check at the airport, I was flagged and called over by security. They opened my bag and began examining my makeup. I tried to explain to them that I was in a Kiss tribute band, but they weren't listening. They examined every inch of my bag and closely looked at my makeup, which I happened to be carrying in my 1978 Kiss lunchbox. After about a 20-minute detainment, they finally let me board the plane. Because I was so pressed for time, the plan was for me to apply my makeup in the car that was picking me up at the airport. The car was supposed to be a luxury town car that would give me plenty of room to work in. However, the car that picked me up was anything but. It was a small, old, beat-up, 2-door Dodge Neon. I obviously couldn't properly apply my makeup while cramped in this small car. I decided to wait until I arrived at the venue. Upon arrival, Ruby thought it was okay to be upset with me for not being ready and in makeup. I quickly told him, Ruby, here's a little heads up. Never speak to me like that again. And he never did. The third show with Kiss Nation was a tribute to Eric Carr's show at the Chance Theater in Poughkeepsie. I couldn't have asked for a better experience than to pay tribute to my idol and to one of the main reasons I played drums. I now was sure that joining Kiss Nation was the right move for my career. Even though I knew that a tribute band was a dead end, It just felt right to be doing what I loved doing. Dressing as Eric Carr and playing Kiss songs every night gave me a strange sense of fulfillment and joy that I wasn't getting with Valentine Smith. Before the Eric Carr tribute show, we met with Eric's sister Loretta. She was the host for the event, and she wanted to meet us and show her gratitude for playing the show in honor of her brother. She was a sweetheart, and I was very happy to meet her. I didn't know it then, but years later we would work together to bring to life one of her brother's dream projects, the animated show, The Rockheads. Here's the theme song for The Rockheads that I wrote with Eric's sister Loretta for the TV show.
Gee, Monkey, I sure hope we could get to the show. There's always something that gets in our way.
No worries, Fluffy. What could possibly go wrong?
Hey! Oh, no!
Here we go again!
We are the Rockheads, ready, set, let's go! Johnny Bugs, four of us, gotta make it to the show. Hop on board, we never stop. We never stop! We are the Rockheads, wondering how we do it all. In school, break, roll, Kevin in the study hall. We just can't be stopped. Can't be stopped. Epic adventures round every corner. Nothing can stand in our way. Epic adventure. Out on the run, lots of mysteries and fun. Rockets, we're ready. Epic adventure. So stand up and cheer as we set up our gear. We know you'll enjoy the show. Ready, set, let's go.
Things were going great with Kiss Nation. I was having a fun time and I couldn't have been happier. Shortly after the Eric Carr tribute show, we got invited by Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley to appear at Tower Records for the official Kiss box set release. My mind once again was blown. Gene and Paul knew us enough to invite us to help promote their new box set. I had never met anyone in Kiss, and this would be my chance to not only meet them, but to be working alongside them to help promote and advertise their new product. The day of the Tower Records event was surreal. The Kiss camp put us up at the Gramercy Hotel in downtown Manhattan. We were to get in makeup and costumes there and then walk over to Tower Records. Once we arrived, it was pandemonium. I hadn't yet experienced a real full-on Kiss crowd while we were in full gear. They went absolutely wild when they saw us, especially because I was Eric Carr. I always felt that me being Eric Carr was more of a tribute to a fallen hero of mine than it was me impersonating someone. The other guys dressing as Gene, Paul, and Ace always would seem like a cheap imitation of the real thing. But because Eric was no longer with us, people had a different kind of affection and appreciation towards me portraying him. When I finally got to meet Gene and Paul, I think they had the same feeling. They seemed a little weirded out by Carlos and Paulie dressing as them, but they had a sense of gratitude when they talked to me about being Eric. It was as if they were seeing their long-lost friend again when they saw me. It was very overwhelming. I had grown up my whole life idolizing Gene and Paul, and now I was working side by side with them, and they seemed to really appreciate me being Eric. This wasn't one of my frozen moments, but I did realize that something special had happened to me that night. Shortly after the Tower Records appearance, Gene asked us to appear with him to help promote his new book, Kiss and Make Up. This was all still pretty crazy for me. Gene Simmons of Kiss was personally requesting us to appear with him to help promote his book. It was as if it wasn't reality. I know this wasn't the fame and fortune that I'd always wanted, but I still thought it was pretty damn cool that I was able to hang out with one of my childhood idols. In a strange way, it made me want to become his peer and equal more than ever. Even though I had a passion and love for Kiss, I never viewed myself as a fanboy. I would never ask them for an autograph or anything like that. It was just weird to me. What I wanted was for them to see me play the drums and for them to think I was good. That's the type of fan I was. I wanted to play with Kiss. I didn't want their autograph. The Kiss and Makeup book signing event with Gene went great. He was kind and appreciative to us throughout the day. He invited us to the after party at a club called Spa in the West Village. We never ran into Gene at the after party, but we did run into a mega Kiss fan that went absolutely bonkers when he saw us. It was none other than Sebastian Bach from the band Skid Row. Sebastian had been a huge Kiss fan all of his life, and he immediately recognized that we were in the Creatures of the Night era costumes. He went nuts when he saw me as Eric Carr. He said, "Holy shit, dude, you look exactly like Eric. I never got to see him in makeup. This is so effing cool." He wanted pictures with us, and we started to hang and drink with him all night. It was a pretty fun and wild night.